Welcome to AI Book Highlights.
Great to be here.
Today we're exploring Edgar Cayce's story of karma. It's a really interesting compilation.
It pulls together his psychic readings specifically on karma.
Right, and his view is quite distinct. He talks about karma as meeting self.
Yeah, not just simple cause and effect, but this continuous journey across lifetimes influencing our present.
So our goal today is to pull out 5 key highlights from this perspective.
And then offer maybe 3 actionable ideas, things you can think about in your own life based on these concepts.
Okay, so let's start with highlight 1, the nature of these karmic records he talks about.
Cayce's readings suggest something pretty fundamental. Thoughts are actual things.
Like they have substance.
In a way, yeah. They create impressions on, well, what he called time and space.
Forming a kind of record.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A record of an entity's experiences. An entity here is broad. It includes the physical body, mind, subconscious, soul. The whole package.
So it's not just actions, but thoughts too, leaving a mark.
Right. And the implication is that these records aren't just lost. They're accessible, psychically, according to Cayce, showing patterns from past lives.
That suggests a real continuity, doesn't it?
A thread running through different lifetimes, which is key to his whole view of karma.
Okay, that leads nicely into the second highlight. This difference between cash karma and what we might call karmic circumstances.
Yeah, cash karma is sort of the immediate stuff.
You do good, good comes back quickly, you mess up, you see the consequence right away.
Exactly. It's that direct feedback loop we sometimes recognize. But then there are the bigger things.
Like why someone's born into wealth or poverty, or with a specific talent or a disability. Things that don't seem directly tied to this life's actions.
Right. And Cayce's readings frame these as potentially being, well, outcomes of past actions playing out.
Or maybe environments specifically set up for learning.
Precisely. It's that concept again, meeting self, but in different contexts to work through things or develop certain qualities.
So it's not random in this view.
Not random, no. Purposeful, even if the purpose isn't immediately obvious.
This ties into the third highlight then, which I found really shifts the perspective. Karma as a personal journey, not mainly an interpersonal debt.
Yes, this is a really important distinction in Cayce's material. People often think of karma as, I owe you, you owe me from a past life.
Like balancing the books between individuals.
But Cayce emphasizes it's more about your personal accounting with God, or the creative forces, as he often terms
Well,
them.
other people are involved, but how?
They provide the conditions, the situations, the means for us to learn our lessons.
So they're catalysts for our own growth.
Exactly. The focus stays on individual spiritual unfoldment, on self-mastery, not just settling scores with others.
Okay. Now the fourth highlight deals with something pretty universal, fear.
Fear comes up a lot in the readings. It's presented as a really fundamental blockage.
Linked to what he called the first consciousness of sins entering in, like a primal separation.
Something like that. A deep-seated thing. And he shows how overpowering fear can really, hold back talents.
Like the example in the book of the nervous pianist.
Yeah, brilliant example. Talent was there, but fear crippled the expression. It creates anxieties, internal conflicts.
And the key is that this fear isn't just out there, it originates within.
That's the core insight. It's an internal condition, not primarily an external threat.
So how do you deal with it, according to Cayce?
It involves turning inward. Things like prayer, meditation, self-understanding.
Recognizing its roots within you.
Yes, and then consciously working to fill that mental and spiritual space with the opposite. Love, faith, understanding. Actively replacing fear.
Okay, that makes sense. The final highlight, number 5, connects karma more directly to, well, physical and mental conditions.
Right. This is where it gets quite specific. The readings attribute various health issues, both physical and mental, to past life experiences or karmic patterns.
The book gives several examples, doesn't it?
It does. Like enuresis, bedwetting in a child, potentially linked to a past life as someone overly critical of children.
Wow.
Or epilepsy, sometimes associated with past life overindulgence or misuse of creative energies.
That's quite specific. What about mental tendencies?
Things like a rebellious nature might stem from past conflicts, maybe around religious freedom, even addictions.
Nicotine, alcohol, food.
Yeah, potentially rooted in past tendencies or mental attitudes carried over.
It even touches on conditions we think of as hereditary.
Suggesting that the soul might inherit conditions that helped build in the past. But the crucial point, repeated again and again,
Is the attitude.
yes, The mental and spiritual attitude is key for true healing, beyond just physical treatments. Even something like cancer, termed sarcoma in one reading, was attributed to karma being met in the physical.
So a lot to unpack there. Let's move to the actionable takeaways. What can people do with this information? Takeaway 1 seems to be about self-reflection.
Yes, becoming more aware. The readings actually suggest keeping a kind of journal.
Tracking.
Your purposes, your thoughts, desires, your actions, both the good and maybe the less helpful ones.
I do that.
It's not about judging yourself harshly. It's about seeing patterns. You start to notice connections between your inner world and what happens externally.
And when difficult things happen.
Consider that possibility of meeting self.
Yeah.
Is this situation echoing something from within, a past attitude or action? Also, analyzing your fears, where do they really come from?
Understanding there are often internal obstacles you can work on
Exactly.
through that inner work.
Okay, takeaway number 2, focusing on personal growth and spiritual unfoldment.
Right. Recognizing that every experience, even the tough ones, is fundamentally an opportunity.
A chance to learn and grow.
So the focus shifts to striving for that self-mastery Cayce talks about, cultivating positive qualities.
Like patience, kindness, brotherly love, those sorts of things.
Yes, and understanding that real healing, whether physical or mental, often needs that shift in mental and spiritual attitude alongside any practical steps.
It's holistic.
Very much so. And the final takeaway, number 3, applies this lens to our relationships.
Yeah, realizing that our attractions or conflicts with people might not be accidental.
They could stem from past associations, unresolved stuff.
That's the idea. Especially challenging family dynamics, sometimes called family karma. These could be opportunities to work through old patterns together.
So the advice isn't just about the other person.
No, it's more about understanding your reactions to them. Why do they push your buttons? It might be rooted in those past associations.
And the goal is
Compassion, forgiveness, understanding, trying to break any negative cycles by changing your own approach within the relationship.
these are definitely some deep concepts.
They really are. It's a complex view of life, responsibility, and growth presented in these readings.
Absolutely. So these highlights just offer a glimpse into the perspective in Edgar Cayce's story of karma.
And thinking about these ideas, it might help you explore potential patterns or influences in your own life.
A way to consciously work towards perhaps greater understanding and positive change.
That's the hope, I think.
Well, thank you for joining us for this exploration on AI book highlights.
My pleasure.
If you found this intriguing and want to dive much deeper into Edgar Cayce's specific readings and insights on karma,
Which we really only scratched the surface of here.
definitely, we encourage you to get a copy of Edgar Cayce's Story of Karma. We've put a link to the book in the description below.
It's worth the read if this sparked your interest.
Thanks again for listening.